U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD's Community Development Block Grant Initiative for Hurricane Sally impacted communities. Per DEO's HUD-approved action plan, we will be funding an infrastructure repair program, voluntary home buyout program, and economic revitalization activities, including the Workforce Recovery Training Program, Housing Repair and Replacement Program, and Hometown Revitalization Program. Affordable Housing Construction Program is not yet designed, but information will be shared as it becomes available. All project awards will be made through a competitive application process. We will also touch briefly on HUD's federal cross-cutting requirements, including subrecipients' obligations and environmental review requirements. We will cover the application process and requirements and provide links to key resources, including information on obtaining a copy of this webinar. After the presentation, we will open the session to questions and answers as time permits. Please use the webinar's chat feature to write any questions you have that arise throughout the presentation. Let me just take a minute to introduce members of the Office of Long-Term Resiliency's Disaster Recovery Team. My name is Leisha Bahena. I am a Bureau Chief for OLTR. I've served previously for a decade in various positions at other state agencies, and then more recently as the Disaster Recovery Administrator for DEO's infrastructure program. Our director is Justin Domer. Justin joined us in January with over 12 years of public administration experience at both the state and federal level. Justin has private sector business experience from his time as president of Domer Inc., a 97-year-old family-owned small business specializing in water well drilling infrastructure services. He also previously served in the Florida Governor's Office. Our deputy bureau chief is Garnet Nevels. Garnet spent 33 years working for the state of Florida before becoming OLTR's program manager for infrastructure. Amanda Eisgroup is OLTR's infrastructure program manager. Her previous positions focused on grant management for community planning, technical assistance, and 2 years as the constituency service manager for disaster recovery. Taylor Doolin is our disaster recovery program manager. Worked as a DEO grant manager while earning his master's degree in political science. He acquired a management experience in the private sector. Anastasia Smith, our housing subrecipient program manager. The legacy umbrella includes the infrastructure repair and replacement program and affordable housing, as well as voluntary home buyout programs. Anastasia is a 19-year veteran of working for the state and local government programs. Jody McCormick is our Bureau Grant Coordinator. Jody worked for 12 years in the private sector on state and federal issues. He has been with DEO for 2 years, where he has held various infrastructure leadership positions. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity's Office of Long-Term Resiliency supports disaster recovery and mitigation projects related to housing, infrastructure, and economic development in Florida's community disasters. Let's spend just a minute on our commonly used acronyms. DEO is the Department of Economic Opportunity. OLTR is DEO's Office of Long-Term Resiliency. HUD is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. CDBG is Community Development Block Grant. DR means disaster recovery, and MIT is mitigation. DEO is the governor designated state authority responsible for administering all HUD, CDBG, DR, and CDBG MIT funds awarded in the state and is currently administering long-term recovery and mitigation programs for hurricanes Hermine, Matthew, Irma, and Michael. Rebuild Florida was created to brand the state's long-term disaster recovery and mitigation efforts. CDBG-DR funding for Hurricane Sally became available to the state in February of 2022. The total allocation for Florida is $187.3 million. DEO's action plan for using the funds was approved in August of 2022. The programs to be funded are an infrastructure repair program. The application cycle for this opened January 15th. A voluntary home buyout program. The application cycle launched January 24th. A workforce recovery training program and a hometown revitalization program. The application launch date for these two programs is February 14th. A housing repair and replacement program. The application launch date for this program is February 28th. Every application cycle will last a minimum of 75 calendar days. We will provide a high-level overview of these programs during this webinar. More detailed information on each of these programs can be found on DEO's website in the Sally Action Plan and in each program's guidelines. Mid areas are determined by HUD and the state-based assessments on the storm-related damages sustained. DEO is required to at least 80% of its Sally CDBG-DR funding within the HUD-designated mid-counties of Escambia and Santa Rosa, indicated in green. The remaining 20% can be spent in state-designated mids. That's Bay, Okaloosa, and Walton, indicated in blue. All of the programs we are reviewing today are for subrecipients only. None of the Sally programs are available directly to contractors or individuals. Subrecipients are defined as non-federal entities such as counties and municipalities that receive an award from DEO in order to provide components of a federal program. Subrecipients carry out these programs with autonomy to make program and eligibility decisions. They also have the responsibility to ensure performance, outcomes, and goals are met. This is in contrast to contractors who are chosen by subrecipients to perform specific scopes of work, but who do not make decisions that impact the overall program or its outcomes. This distinction is important because subrecipients have a greater level of responsibility to ensure the successful, compliant implementation of CDBG-DR MIT programs. Projects. This includes the responsibility of monitoring project progress in contractors and ensuring compliance with all applicable federal regulations. The subrecipient process illustrated here shows the life cycle of awarded projects in the coordination with DEO. As with other federally funded programs, we cannot just progress directly from applications and awards to project implementations. The steps in between are essential. DEO and its subrecipients will be partners during this process and must coordinate through all stages of it. All eligible activities will be scored and site visits will follow. After the top projects are selected, the next stage is the award process. That stage is followed by the subrecipient agreement process, during which a scope of work that defines all project tasks and deliverables will be finalized. The first stage of the environmental review process, which is securing an exemption, may begin when development of the subrecipient agreement is underway. Following the execution of the subrecipient agreement, the subrecipient will be responsible for submitting documentation to illustrate compliance with the terms of the agreement and federal regulations. This will include the remaining environmental review requirements. After federal requirements have been fulfilled, the subrecipient will receive an authority to use grant funds. This is when the project implementation can actually begin. As a reminder, this is a reimbursement-based program, which means that DEO will reimburse for costs incurred and documented by each subrecipient. Finally, as the projects conclude, we will go through a grant closeout process. Throughout this process, we will expect regular communication and coordination between DEO and its subrecipients. This includes monitoring by DEO as well as regular reporting by subrecipients. Let's begin here with a breakdown of the programs that are eligible for SALI CDBG funding. Those projects that meet the SALI State Action Plan and Federal Register requirements, including but not limited to projects located in HUD and state identified MIDs, projects that primarily serve LMI populations, projects that do not duplicate benefits. Cities, towns, counties, and water management districts in SALI MID areas are eligible to apply. Other entities, such as nonprofits, may be eligible to apply in partnership with municipalities and counties. Please refer to the SALI Action Plan and program guidelines for eligibility specifics. Activities funded by CDBG DR mitigation set-aside do not require a tieback to a specific qualified disaster that has served as the basis for the grantee's allocation. Grantees must demonstrate that mitigation activities funded meet a HUD definition of mitigation activities, address the current and future risk as identified in the grantee's mitigation needs, meets a national objective. Once fundamental requirements are met, eligible project activities include restoration, infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Sally, creation, public facilities such as emergency community shelters, demolition, rehabilitation of public and privately owned commercial or industrial buildings. Economic revitalization includes any CDBG DR eligible activity that directly restores and improves some aspect of the local economy. $67 million have been set aside for Infrastructure Repair Program, IRP. The goal of using these funds is to restore and improve infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Sally. At least 15% of the infrastructure funding must be allocated to building resiliency or mitigation against the impacts of future storms. The award minimum is $750,000. The application cycle for this program opened January 18th and closes April 4th. The infrastructure program is designed to address unmet infrastructure and mitigation needs in communities impacted by Hurricane Sally. Infrastructure projects may include restoration of water and sewer facilities, streets, drainage and bridges, demolition of and rehabilitation of publicly or privately owned commercial or industrial buildings, renourishment of protective coastal dune systems and state beaches, repairs to damaged buildings that are essential to the health, safety, and welfare of a community, including police stations, fire stations, parks, and recreational centers, community and senior centers, hospitals, clinics, homeless shelters, school and educational facilities, and other public properties, including properties serving as emergency shelters. Also, repair to water lines, sewer lines, drainage, and flood mitigation systems. The mitigation benefits of SALI projects should include enhancing resiliency against future storms, for example, flooding threats, preservation, guarding against the premature obsolescence of critical infrastructure. Mitigation projects might include development of mitigation standards, regulations, policy and programs, land use zoning policies, development and adherence to strong building code and floodplain management regulations, dam safety programs, seawalls and levee systems, acquisition of flood-prone and environmentally sensitive lands, retrofitting or hardening and elevating structures and critical facilities, relocation of structures, infrastructure, and facilities out of vulnerable areas, improvement of warning evacuation systems. The VHB program is a $22 million program designed to encourage risk reduction by acquiring properties in high-risk flood areas. Projects must benefit areas in which 51% of the residents are low to moderate income, and properties purchased must be residences of LMI qualifying households. The minimum award for this program is $750,000. The application cycle opened on January 24th and will close on April 14th. Applicants must meet eligibility requirements as outlined in Section 105, subparagraph A1 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 as amended. Buyouts are only for non-commercial properties, which may include owner-occupied structures, residential rental properties, or vacant lots. Plans for restoration of property to green spaces should be included. To be considered an eligible property for buyout, the property must be located within a designated mid-area, be located within a floodway. The full fee title of properties must be from willing voluntary sellers. $45 million has been allocated for the subrecipient housing repair and replacement program. The goal with these funds is to repair, replace, and or reconstruct homes damaged by Hurricane Sally. The focus is on LMI communities. The department will adhere to fair housing requirements as outlined in the Federal Register, and projects must undergo a fair housing review before approval. The application minimum award amount is $750,000. The application cycle for this program opens February 28th and closes on May 15th. Projects that will be eligible for the HRRP include temporary relocation, demolition and clearance, single-family housing rehabilitation and repair, multifamily housing rehabilitation and repair, housing construction, public housing, emergency, community, and homeless shelters, repair and replacement of manufactured housing units, hazard mitigation, elevation, planning activities related to housing, and other activities associated with the recovery of housing stock. DEO will be requiring construction method standards that focus on quality, durability, energy efficiency, sustainability, and mold resistance. Small businesses are the lifeblood of local economies. Because of this, DEO is offering a $13.5 million hometown revitalization program. The HRP will support the recovery of $500,000. The HRP application cycle is from February 14th through May 1st. Eligible activities for hometown revitalization include public facility improvements, including streetscapes, lighting, sidewalks, and other physical improvements to commercial areas, acquisition, demolition, site preparation, and or rehabilitation of commercial structures carried out by a unit of local government, assistance to small businesses for rehabilitation and physical improvements in their places of business, and facade improvements to private or public structures in commercial area. The $5 million workforce training program is designed to provide funding opportunities for local workforce development boards, educational institutions, and technical centers located in communities by Hurricane Sally to be used in training new workers in construction trades that are currently lacking in skilled workers. The minimum amount is a $1 million award. The application cycle is from February 14th through May 1st. The needs of each community will dictate the type of workforce training programs that should be offered to help revitalize local cities and towns. These might include roofing, masonry, carpentry, concrete finishing, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, heavy equipment operations, flooring installation, glass and window installation, plastering, welding, and training customized to economic revitalization needs of the community. We are going to now touch on the federal HUD standards to which all award subrecipients must adhere to. You should be aware of these federal requirement expectations at a high level now, so there are no surprises in the event your project is selected for an award. There are high-level expectations that HUD and DEO have of all subrecipients. Detailed information on each of these are available in the Sally Policy and Procedures Manual, as well as the Action Plan, the Federal Register, and the HUD.gov website. The requirements will also be a component of the subrecipient agreement that we will generate for our grant award winners. Subrecipients are expected to understand and comply with federal regulations related to procurement, environmental reviews, labor standards, relocations, fair housing, and audits. Subrecipients must also maintain comprehensive program records, monitor contractors for compliance, monitor and report on activity progress, and achieve performance goals. 2 CFR 200-318 through 326 details the procurement requirements for using federal funds. 2 CFR 200-330 details real property requirements, which may be triggered depending on the nature of the activity. We encourage subrecipients to familiarize themselves with these requirements and read through the regulations. These requirements are in place to ensure fair and open competition for all federally funded procurements. URA generally applies to activities that require the acquisition, rehabilitation, or demolition of property using HUD funding in any phase of the project. URA requirements apply even if you use your own funds for acquisition. If a subrecipient undertakes any activity subject to the URA, they must submit all the required documentation as outlined in the Sally Policy Manual. Please note, no acquisition of property should be done prior to the completion of an environmental review on the property. Use option contracts for the acquisition of property where the environmental review has not been conducted, and please, in that case, consult with DEO. Section 3 promotes employment for low and very low income individuals through federally funded contracts. Subrecipients should encourage contractors to hire qualified low and very low income individuals for any job openings that exist on CDBG DR funded projects in the community. Records documenting the number of hours these individuals worked on projects will be required. A Section 3 contract clause must be included in all CDBG DR funded contracts. CDBG DR funded infrastructure projects will most likely trigger Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. This requires that contractors performing on federally funded contracts in excess of $2,000 for construction, alteration, or repair to pay wages at rates not less than those prevailing on similar constructions in the locality as determined by the U.S. Department of Labor. Recipients of CDBG-DR funds must comply with federal and state civil rights, including fair housing, equal opportunity, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and Americans with Disabilities Act. These laws are designed to ensure that members of protected groups are treated fairly by avoiding discrimination, providing equal opportunity, in taking affirmative action to correct past discriminations based on race, color, religion, gender, national origin, age, sex, disability, and family status. All CDBG-DR projects require some level of environmental review in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and 24 CFR Part 58, even when there may be no obvious environmental impacts. Many projects will require a two-step environmental review process. The exempt activities certification generally covers project activities that do not interact with or modify the environment, like planning, administration, and operating costs. This certification can be completed and submitted to DEO as soon as funds are awarded. Most projects will require much more extensive level of environmental review to address potential environmental impacts associated with project implementation. This process takes several months, with the complexity dependent on the nature of the project. Project activities not covered by the exempt activities certification cannot begin until a full environmental review is completed and approved by DEO. Once the application is submitted, entering into contracts or conducting other project-related activities is prohibited by HUD regulation until the appropriate level of environmental review is complete. Committing grant funds or conducting any activities that could limit the consideration of alternative actions prior to receiving environmental clearance could lead to a loss of the grant. Project funds are not reimbursable until a subrecipient agreement is executed and an exemption is. Forms will be provided to award recipients. Let's conclude today's webinar by reviewing Hurricane Sally Disaster Recovery Mitigation Application Process. DEO provides an online software tool called Qualtrics for completing and submitting project applications. A link to Qualtrics application instructions is available on each of DEO's Hurricane Sally web pages. To use the system, applicants must submit an online application request form for the program to which they wish to apply. The form is available on each respective Sally Rebuild Florida program pages. That is the unique pages for infrastructure repair, voluntary home buyout, workforce recovery training, hometown revitalization, housing repair and replacement, and workforce affordable housing programs. After it receives a request form, DEO will provide a link to the application portal for completing and submitting an application. This generally takes up to 24 hours. A separate request form and link is needed for every proposed project application. Applications must be submitted through the online application portal. We recommend, however, that applicants draft a Word or PDF version, both for ease of editing during the application preparation and so they have backup versions of the application for your files. Please make sure your Wi-Fi connection is strong and reliable. Do not delete the cookies during the process. To navigate through the application, click the green arrow buttons at the bottom pane of the application. Do not click the back button in the top left-hand corner of your browser. The application input saves as you work. There is no save button. Do not click past the signature page until you are finished, or your application will be automatically submitted. This slide is not an exhaustive list of application requirements, but it does highlight some of the required information all applicants should be prepared to submit. Your FEIN and unique identifier numbers and contact information, confirmation of flood insurance or intent to secure prior to award, project's area of benefit. It must be in one of the qualifying MIT areas. Evidence of meeting citizens' participation requirements, including a copy of your public notice and public hearing minutes, and a copy of any comments submitted by the public. Maps of the proposed project's area of benefit, LMI, and floodplain, up to 10 pictures related to the project, project team organizational chart, work plan template, which is a list of tasks, milestones, and timeframe estimates. Evidence of meeting a national objective, including LMI census or survey data. The required application narratives should include a project description, including the purpose of your project, what activities you are proposing, how your work will be done, and anticipated outcomes. A mitigation project description, if applicable. Damage summary and tie back to Hurricane Sally for all programs except for MIT activities. A description of unmet needs in the proposed project's area of benefit, what the needs are and how the project will address them. A description of your management capacity, including the roles and experience of key staff. A description of your procurement process. A questionnaire regarding your readiness to proceed includes questions regarding the need for land acquisition, site control, zoning and community approvals, environmental clearance status, and commitments or matching funds and more. Your budget, including project-related quotes and matching or leverage funds. A video of this webinar will be posted on the Hurricane Sally webpage. The Sally webpage also has links to the state action plan, the Federal Register, and policies and procedures related to Hurricane Sally. Links to each of the programs being offered with Sally funding are also provided on this page. In addition to the online information, technical assistance is available by sending your questions to the program-specific emails listed on the slide. We will now pause to collect questions received on our chat feature, and then we'll answer your questions as time permits. If we do not cover your question during the Q&A session, please reach out to us using the emails listed on the slide. Thank you for your patience while we gathered some of these questions to provide responses. And just as a reminder, for the questions that we don't respond to, we please send those questions in writing to the emails provided on this slide. And first of all, a big thank you to Alex for providing the link to the Sally webpage. Hopefully everybody got that. If not, this link is, you'll be able to link on the be able to click on the link on the slide deck as soon as it is posted. Jody McCormick is going to join me today to work through some of the questions that we received. One of the questions we received, Jody, is how many applications can we submit to each program?
Thank you, Leisha. 3 applications per entity may be submitted for the infrastructure repair program, the hometown revitalization program, the Workforce Recovery Training Program. Only one application per entity is allowed for both the Voluntary Home Buyout Program and Housing Repair and Replacement Program. Applicants for those two programs are, however, encouraged to incorporate multiple residential units in their applications. Another one of the questions that we have fielded is regarding the budget template, I believe, for infrastructure. We are going to update both of them so they are the same on both sites. It should be the one that's in the guidelines at this moment. So we had another one about voluntary home buyout. Is the intent of VHB to buy out property of willing homeowners and the municipality use the property for resiliency improvements to the area, such as stormwater flood improvements, or just keep the property vacant? So yes, the program does require that the property owners are willing sellers. The municipality or county is encouraged by the program guidelines to either have that as a green space, as a park, or another community service. And it may also be used for infrastructure flooding related mitigation activities. So I know that that's not super specific. If you have any additional questions on that, please get with Anastasia Smith, who is our subrecipient housing program manager, and she will be happy to assist you further. Okay, another question that we had is, my project may not be in an LMI area. Can I apply for the programs under the Urgent Need National Objective? So, while Urgent Need is an eligible national objective, priority for these programs will be given to LMI applications. The Urgent Need National Objective may only be used when the project is needed to alleviate emergency conditions, but does not meet the LMI benefit requirements. If you plan to submit an application utilizing the Urgent Need National Objective, please consult the Hurricane Sally Policy Manual for all justification documents that will be required for your application. Another question that we have received is a local share or match required for any of the Sally programs? There are no local share or match requirements for the Rebuild Florida programs for Hurricane Sally. Although local, state, and or federal leverage is not required for participation in the programs, it will be a factor that is favorably considered when scoring the applications. Okay, we're gonna have one last question and then I will hand it back over to Leisha to wrap everything up. Again, if we have not gotten to your question, please send it to the program emails and we will address them in the order in which we receive them. The last question is for the infrastructure repair mitigation activities. Infrastructure activities must directly tie back to Hurricane Sally. Mitigation activities are those that will result in a more resilient community, but they need not tie back to the specific disaster. It is to note that infrastructure activities may be considered mitigation activities if they repair and harden infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Sally. When tieback does not exist, mitigation activities must address infrastructure deficiencies that make communities more vulnerable to future disasters.
Thank you, Jody. And here again, If you have additional questions or your questions weren't answered, please follow up by sending us an email on the emails provided on the slide. And on behalf of the OLTR team, we want to thank you for your attendance today, and we look forward to receiving your applications. I hope everybody has a great afternoon.